Gentlemen, members of the committee, I'm State Representative John Yates, Chairman of the Defense and Veterans Affairs Committee, and we are here today to discuss House Bill 188. We've had two versions, I guess, a substitute to it, and I was just given the last copy here. But I want to say that got a statement here I want to read to cover a few things before we start to say where we are. About a week ago we met on this bill. We found out that it was not as complete as a lot of people would have liked. Probably would not have been acceptable on the House floor. So we met in the back of the room there with the governor's people and with some industry people and decided that we ought to have a meeting on this. So they set up a meeting, the governor's people set up a meeting over across the street from the Capitol and discussed a lot of things, and there's been a lot of discussions since then. So they came up with a bill, and it came up with another version that I just saw this morning. So I don't know whether we'll be able to get to a vote or not, but we work toward that end. Industry representative and the governor people met and kind of worked this thing out. The governor's floor leader, governor's representatives worked with Mr. David Brundrich, my friend and my very able attorney here, to come up with this new, which would be a committee substitute if we get it passed. I believe that we can agree to stipulate that all of us want to help our veterans who have done so much for us. We be able to find employment and also their spouses. We can also agree that we want to make our Georgia craftsmen more efficient by cutting out unneeded rules and regulations, but to ensure that they are working safely with skilled employees. I want to thank the representatives of the various crafts, especially Mr. Mark Woodall and Bruce, who has furnished some valuable information. And also Ms. Pridemore and her people working for the governor, and also Representative Kuma, put this thing together. I had hoped that all of our meetings would produce a passable bill for us to vote on today. So today I would like each of you, when you make your talk on this, to explain which lines in your estimation is something you can't live with, some whatever objectionable to you, and suggest words to delete or add. Hopefully you can give our legislative counsel, Mr. Brundrich, words for him to use in an amendment or a new bill if that is necessary. For those who wonder why I seem to be slowing up the process, I would say that my legislative assistant has received scores of mail against the original bill, and that doesn't mean necessarily against this bill because they haven't seen this, of course. But we have not received a single email in favor of the bill. When that many of our people are against something, it pays for a representative to listen. So do I have a motion to take this bill off the table, and a second? All in favor of taking the bill off the table, raise your right hand. Opposed? So it looks like we want to hear it, and that's good. So we'll start off and the governor's floor leader will be first. That's Representative Kuma. Oh, which one are you? Let's see. This here? Oh, it's up there. Okay.
Try it.
Go ahead.
Are we good now? There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that introduction. And let me say, first of all, thank you to all the folks who have been involved in this process. There have been numerous industry representatives, as well as Tricia Pridemore and the Governor's Office of Workforce Development, who have worked with me to try to craft something that will be both meaningful and frankly not harmful. And so we have we have had two revised versions that we've gone through in the last 24 hours in continued consultation with all the interested parties to try to get us to something passable.
You
and I will go through
to call out the LC number?
The LC number, the current version is LC 212126S. So that's 2126.
I don't think I have it.
The one you had from yesterday was a 2125. So this is 2126 is the current version we're working with today.
Okay.
And I will.
Does everybody have that one? Okay.
I believe all the members of the committee have it, sir.
Thank you.
So to briefly point out that 2126, and I got this morning. Well, actually, I got an email of it last night about 6 p.m. or so. And I printed it out this morning at 7, and I got all the copies made by about 7:45 and got it here just in time for committee. So that's why you haven't had it before just now. Again, because we were working all through the day and the afternoon and the evening trying to get something that everybody could, some language that could be agreed to by the majority of the interested parties. And the most important interested parties being the members of this committee. So I think we're there, but y'all have to decide that today. Let me point out the changes from 2125, which you had since yesterday, to 2126, which you have before you now. There really are two substantive changes, or two changes. These changes appear in several places through the bill, but they're basically two changes. One is, first appears on line 23. Well, lines 22 and 23. And I guess I should set it up this way. This bill would authorize the Secretary of State's division director to determine whether a military member in a specific MOS or AFSC, a specialty code, should be exempt from examination before receiving a specific certification. The certification is listed on the next page. This bill does not, conversely, does not throw the gate open to say anybody who has a military background can come in and be a certified whatever. All it does is basically instructs the Secretary of State's division director to do some research and find out if a person with a particular military specialty code should be exempt from the testing. So this is not an automatic. When you vote, if you vote do pass and then this bill becomes law, ultimately, you will not have thrown the door open for everybody who has a DD-214 to automatically be a licensed electrician in Georgia. That's not what the bill does. It simply authorizes the Secretary of State to determine if that's appropriate for some individuals who may have a particular military specialty or military certification. So getting back to the language of the bill, in paragraph B, which is lines 22 and 23, the language is that the division director, in consultation with the Governor's Office of Workforce Development, and 5 members of the relevant divisions of the licensing board who shall be designated by the governor, shall determine the military specialties or certifications, the training or experience for which substantially meet or exceed the requirements to obtain the following professional licenses. What that means is, before anybody can be approved for waiving the licensing exam, the division director must coordinate and consult with the Office of Workforce Development, as well as 5 members of the relevant division of the licensing board. Now, the reason it's worded that way is because we're basically dealing with 2 licensing boards, but one of those licensing boards has divisions that are composed of the functional area experts. So there's a division that has to do just with electricians, and there's a division that has just to do with plumbers. So if we're going to talk about how a person may exempt or be exempted from taking the test for plumbing, for example, then there will be a 5-member panel, essentially, drawn from the board members of the relevant division, the plumbing division, who will consult with Office of Workforce Development and the division director. And what that process is intended to produce is a definitive answer as to whether or not there is, in fact, a military specialty code that meets or exceeds the Georgia requirements for certification. And if so, then a person with that particular military specialty code who meets all the other requirements of the bill would be able to waive in the initial certification period without the examination. They would still have to renew in the same process as everyone else. They would still have to maintain all of the other requirements for licensure, including or certification, including any insurance requirements, net worth requirements, as they're relevant in some of these sections, as well as bonding requirements if they are applicable. So the only thing that a military member who qualifies gets is a waiver of the initial examination for the entry into the profession at the level that's stated in the bill. So it's not as broad and sweeping as it may appear at first glance, but that's what it's tailored intentionally to open the door for the Secretary of State to start that process. We are not ourselves opening that door without further investigation by another body to make sure that we're doing the right thing, or make sure that that waiver is appropriate under the circumstances. The other change that you'll find throughout is first referenced in line 36 and then again in line 56, and that is the 180-day limit for people to apply for this benefit or this waiver, and that is for the military member portion. It has to be within 180 days of their discharge from service. Discharge is defined in the bill as a discharge, an honorable discharge, or a general discharge. It does not include DD, a BCD, or a UOTHC. It's only for those individuals who get an honorable or general discharge. And so it's within 180 days that the person has to apply in order to get that benefit, within 180 days of their discharge. And then it's, the next section in line 56, which has to do with the spouses who may be able to take advantage of this bill. It's within 180 days of their relocation to the state of Georgia. So we're putting a limit. We don't want somebody who's been in Georgia for 16 years who happened to have had some certification from another state 20 years before to be able to come in and essentially game this bill and get a waiver of an examination. We don't want to create an unsafe standard. We want to make sure people are current in their profession. So that's why we have the limitation of the 180 days from residency or 180 days from discharge. Excuse me, 180 days from relocation in this state, relocation to the state. Those are the primary changes from the most recent version, and I think that covers the most substantive changes from the last time we were here. There are people I know who are here to assist, both from the National Guard and from the the Governor's Office of Workforce Development. And if you have any questions that I can't answer, then they're here to help us answer those questions. But I stand for questions at this time.
Do you have any more of these copies that some of the journeymen or whatever could look at?
I gave all of my copies to the assistant for the committee.
Could somebody make some copies?
I brought 14 for the committee and one for myself.
Somewhere and make some copies. Let's ask the question: do the people out there, you feel comfortable, or you'd literally have a copy in front of you? Mark, you got a copy?
No, sir, but
you're familiar with?
The last draft to address some issues. Those changes that Representative Kuma mentioned were ones that in the draft you have that we brought to them.
Okay, all right. I just want to be sure if anybody felt like we should wait a few minutes to get copies, because I apologize for the fact that we got these at the last minute, and Mr. Kummer, are you through with your presentation?
Yes, sir. If there are no questions, I'm
open to questions here. Yeah. Is he on?
Okay.
You're
Still working?
okay? Go ahead.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
All right. And this is, I basically have two questions, and they're not related to each other necessarily, but there's a lot of, the idea of this bill is to allow them not to have to take the test in order to get the certification. Why not just allow them to take the test to get the certification?
well,
Instead of waiting the time, let them take the test to be certified, and that seems like that would eliminate a lot of the problems we're trying to solve on time and other issues.
Well, part of the problem has been that the tests are not offered with enough frequency to get people into the workforce quickly. And part of the background on this bill is we're expecting 80,000 of these. Let me get my stats right. Just a moment, please. We have literally, and I'll just say it this way, literally thousands of these skilled trade positions that are coming available through retirement and through the growth in the market, and we can't keep up, frankly, with the demand for the jobs. The idea of using the veteran workforce, which, as I said the last time, we have the fourth largest veteran population. We have tens of thousands of veterans leaving active duty and active service each year and staying in Georgia, whether from the Guard or Reserve or active duty. And those folks are a ready and available workforce, some of whom have the skills necessary to fill a part of that gap in the workforce. But having them wait 6 months or a year to be able to take a test simply because it's not offered because of funding issues, because of budget problems, or a lack of funding from the state, doesn't help fill the need of putting veterans to work. Because when they're not working, guess what? They're on unemployment. That's costing the state as well. But it doesn't fill the need of getting them back to a work situation more quickly. And it also doesn't satisfy the demand in the industry for those laborers who have that particular certification and skill. So the problem in the delay is really a factor of the economy, and there's a delay between the economy's recovery and revenue recovery. So while we see good signs in the economy, and certainly there are openings in these fields now, the revenue stream to have the test offered every 30 days or in some more frequent fashion simply is not there at this time.
Well, then, in the Secretary of State's operation, are they going to look at an individual person or a particular MOS, or how are they going to make that evaluation?
Sure. The bill actually says that, and this is, now I'm looking at an older version, but this part hasn't changed, and I think it's in line 26 of the current version. Somewhere in that frame, subsection B says the division director, in consultation with these other folks, shall determine the military specialties or certifications, the training or experience for which substantially meet or exceed the requirements to obtain the professional license. So it's going to be a determination of military specialties or certifications. It's not a determination of individuals. So if a military specialty or certification has the requirements that meet or exceed our requirements, then a person who has that current certification and a DD-214, and they're within 180 days of their separation, then that person will be able to waive or be exempt from the initial testing requirement to enter into that particular defined profession.
I don't want to speak for the Secretary of State's office.
I think there's someone here from the Secretary of State's office. Yes. The division director, in fact. Is
okay. I know that there are, because of budgetary cuts, some delays in getting licensures. And we're looking at 60, 90 days. Would that be typical? So is the presence of that MOS, the presence of the time, presence of the other criteria, will that have to go through the same process? So it'll be 90 days before they get it, 60 days? Approval? You know, this is what I'm thinking about time that we have now versus time taking the test, time of clearing some of these issues for people, and I know that I personally have a minor problem when, say, electrical contractor, because they're, by most standards, allowed to sign off on jobs, and I'm not sure that whatever experience they would have that necessary knowledge to be able to sign off on jobs and other people's work.
Well, I think that's where you're getting into whether an individual is qualified, and that's not really the call we're making in this bill. We are opening the opportunity for the Secretary of State to determine that a class of people would be exempt. And so, you know, I can't speak to the individual qualifications of any person for any of these trades. I'm certainly not an expert myself in these trades. But I think what you may be finding yourself sort of down in the weeds on an issue, for example, the definition of electrical contractor, which is not addressed in this bill but has already been established in code through other bills, and we're just borrowing by reference those categories that have already been established. I can tell you that electrical contractor, as used in this code, I believe it's Class 1, electrical contractor Class 1, is the most limited, essentially entry-level electrical contractor class, limited by either the cost of the job or the size of the job, so that the idea being we would have different levels of these certifications so that a person couldn't do more work than they were really qualified to do and get themselves and others into trouble or into danger. So again, what we're seeking to do in these 5 classifications is give people the more or less the entry-level certification. If they're proficient and they continue to grow in their job and their ability and their business grows, certainly we hope that in the future years they'll advance to the next level. But we're just going to let them get a foot in the door.
They would be taking the test at that point.
I can't speak to what the further requirements are.
Right.
I only know that this waives the test for the initial entry exam.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Representative Smith next. Smith to come up next.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning, sir.
Smith.
Yes.
Representative Coomer, thank you and the other signatories for bringing this bill to the floor. I have a question. Are you prior military?
Yes, sir. I am 4 years active duty in the United States Air Force, 8 years reserve, and now 1 year in the Georgia National Guard.
One of the things I'd like to ask, I have 2 questions. First, you mentioned that this really and truly would stanch one of the problems that we're looking at not only here in Georgia but across the country, is the fact that there may be a vacuum with our technical skilled trades due to baby boomers retiring.
That's correct.
And
sir.
this will really and truly help that process. Secondary to that, is it not true that with military persons coming on board that have the significant skill sets that we so richly need. You're not only getting a military person that has the skill set, but also under esprit de corps requirements has the discipline, the focus, and the responsibility to step in and actually do the job and help, where typically not only would you have to train someone to know the job, but train them to be a manager, train them to be a supervisor, and train them to be a team member. Would that not kind of cover much of what this would also help as well?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And last one, we're not talking about bringing in some technical consortiums to compete against the professional trades in the state of Georgia, but to be employees and to enrich and embellish these technical skill sets that we have in Georgia so that we can all basically reap the benefits of their skill and expertise and help the economy as well.
I think you're correct. I would point out some of these folks may decide to go out on their own and be entrepreneurs, but what we are trying to do is address a group of people who have a particular skill set and let some of those people who choose to come into these professions in Georgia as individuals.
But the overarching precept is that this would be a major positive as opposed to a competitive negative.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And I will add to that point, I've had conversations with people in the industries, not just the representatives here, but folks from back home who've called me about this bill with questions about it and concerns about it. And every one of them, to an individual, has said, I don't really care about the competition. I just want to make sure we're doing something that is safe. And so I think the idea that somehow somebody might be concerned about this sort of muscling in on their territory, I haven't heard that particular concern, but I appreciate you bringing that up. And again, as to the safety issues, that's why we're directing that nobody be able to take advantage of this exemption until and unless these three separate entities, the division director, the Office of Workforce Development, and the 5-member panel of experts consult and determine that waiver is appropriate.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Chairman Yates. Representative Coomer, I appreciate the work that you've done on this bill and also for the efforts of the Governor's Office and the trade associations. And I want to make sure that I understand the operating framework. I think I do, but I want to confirm it with you. The basic intent is to provide for service members that are leaving active duty that have a certain level of training and expertise to limit the regulatory hurdles that they have to go through to go into the workforce. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
And the intent also is that this won't lower the standards, but rather will keep them either at or above what everybody in the civilian sector has to achieve. Is that also
correct.
accurate?
Okay. Meet or exceed is the operative language.
Correct. The only other question that I have, and I understand the changes that are in subsection B, and I think that they're very good, is will the Secretary of State's office publish their rationale in some way so the trade associations can see the basis by which they're making these determinations?
I'm going to ask the division director to stand up and identify herself for you, and hopefully she can answer that question.
Thank you.
I'm Lisa Durbin, and I'm the division director for the professional licensing boards. I think any meeting that we would have with the board members and with the Governor's Office of Workforce Development to come up with these comparable job titles, if you will, would have to be, I think those would be subject to the Open Meetings Act, and so that information would be public, and if it was the committee's desire, and if it does fall under that, then we can certainly make those minutes or the findings from that committee public.
If I may ask a follow-up question to that, would you need us to include that in the statute as a requirement that you publish your findings, or would you do that as a matter of course?
I think we would do that as a matter of course. I think that's how that works, because all of the meetings are subject to the Open Meetings Act.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Coomer, I'm just going to ask a couple questions that we talked a little bit about yesterday.
Sure.
First is, can you give me some sense of what, let's see, an appropriately trained former military member who's left service and is trained in, pick your skill, let's say HVAC, conditioned air contractor class 1, as an example. What could that person do for work absent a license, and what additional things might that individual be able to do with a license?
Well, I suppose in your example, the person without a license could be what we would classify an unskilled laborer. They could carry heavy equipment from a truck to a work site. They could potentially drive a truck if it's not a truck that requires a CDL license. They could, I suppose they could follow whatever directions any other unskilled laborer could follow to the extent that individual is personally capable of doing that. With a certification, they would then be able to, as I understand it, to a limited extent, limited by the definitions already in code, be able to do the technical professional work of a person who's certified in a particular trade to do that work, as opposed to somebody who works on his own home or somebody who works as an unskilled labor employee for some other company.
So if I came out with skills in heating and air conditioning out of the military, do I need to get a license before I can go work for, Coomer Heating and Cooling as a technician? Is that a requirement?
Well, I think that, I don't mean to be too lawyerly, but I'm not sure where the idea of technician comes in. What I mean is, I'm not sure, because I'm not an expert in the field. I don't have Coomer Heating and Air. I do have Christian Coomer, attorney at law, Cartersville, Georgia, if anybody's looking. Yeah, certainly not. But to your point, very seriously, I couldn't tell you at what point you're crossing from the threshold of doing what is acceptable for any unskilled laborer to do and into the area that we only allow certified technicians to do. In any of these particular categories, that's not something that I have drilled down into. I mean, that's not a question that I anticipated, so I apologize. I can't answer that one specifically.
Sure. Well, I mean, my question is based on, there's a premise with this bill that we have veterans who have skills and are somehow being prevented from working in areas where we believe there are jobs. So I'm just trying, and maybe somebody from one of the agencies can address this, but I'm just curious, what is it the license that is preventing them from being able to be gainfully employed in these areas? Because I'm not familiar with them. The language in here talks about these being contractor licenses. So does that mean they're being licensed to be a contractor, as in working on their own and hiring other people? Or do you need a license even just to practice in this area under somebody else's supervision? So that's why I'm just trying to understand.
Counsel for the committee has just handed me actually he's handed me a laptop, but he's pointed out for me that 43-14-2, which defines conditioned air contracting, the definition says that it means the installation, repair, or service of conditioned air systems or conditioned air equipment, and including the attachments that may be electrical or ductwork and so forth.
Okay. So to actually install an air conditioning unit, you need to be licensed.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I do agree that
although I'm seeing evidence in the audience
sure,
that maybe that's not the case.
I'm sure they'll have a chance to speak, Mr. Chairman. If I could have the floor for a few more minutes, I'd appreciate it.
You're going to have it.
Okay.
I was
Thank
just
you.
making a statement.
It just seemed a bit odd that there was suddenly an uproar from the crowd there, because I was just quoting from the code section. I did not make that up. That's what the code section says. So if the code section says that you have to have that certification to do that work, but there are members of a trade that are not abiding by that code section, that might be a problem for enforcement issues. I don't think that's a problem for this code section, though. And so as to the very definition, you can't do the work if you don't have the certification. Does that answer the question? I mean, again, it's just code.
Sure, I think so. And one other question. So let's say I have some training and I'm going to take a license exam. Does this examination test my technical knowledge alone, or does it test my technical knowledge and other areas that may be relevant for me to practice? Like I'm just guessing maybe something like business ethics or anything else. So I just want a sense of what kind of knowledge we're asking people to have in order to pass a licensing exam.
And I'm going to defer again to the division director if she's prepared to answer that question.
I don't know specifically what's on any particular exam, but I know that most of the exams are geared towards technical skills for the profession that's being tested, and with some exams there's test questions geared towards the laws and rules for that profession.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
We have, who's next? This one? Okay. Mr. Smith, Representative Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Coomer. I think it's important that everyone kind of grasp the gravity and degree of expertise that we're talking about bringing into the civilian workforce. In the military, only the best of the best are certified. Only the best of the best, from aviation on down the line. To give an example, as an air traffic controller, you go to school for over 6 months. Your classes may start, you may have 100 people that start the first day. On the last day, graduation, you usually have about 12 out of 100. Best of the best. And that's each of the respective career fields. The technical skills, that's why you notice Air Force and Army and Marine and Navy facilities don't have to call in any city technical skill sets to do any work on these facilities because the skill sets are there. The actual military people do the work. They are certified and qualified to do the work. So we're talking about bringing qualified skill sets into the civilian sector. Is that not what we're looking at?
Sure, and to make that point even more pronounced, in the military, you can actually be court-martialed for not doing your job right. I mean, it's a crime to be deficient in your job in the military. So you can be charged with dereliction of duty under the Uniform Code of Military Justice if you don't do your job correctly. So I think your point is well taken. There is a very rigorous selection process for any particular field or specialty. And certainly we have, in the military, as in any other field, we have some folks who maybe not proficient in one area, maybe they emphasize something else. And that's why we're not trying to throw the door open for anybody who's a veteran. They certainly have some skills they bring, but they may not bring the technical skills they need to this particular profession. So we are limiting it to those folks who have made it through that rigorous process of certification for their particular AFSC or specialty.
Thank you.
Representative Glanton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late this morning. I had a caucus meeting at 8 o'clock. So
that's all right. But I think this is the first time we've had a complete list of all of our members here, so that's something to cheer about.
All right. And this may very well have been answered. As a former general contractor, I want to understand that the military folks that are coming out, that are qualified and have done this job in the military, when they come out and they receive this direct certification, will that allow them to not only be certified to do the job, but certified to inspect jobs?
I'm not. When you say inspect, do you mean
as a general, if I'm a home inspection, if I do home inspections, and I need to bring in an HVAC or someone like that to actually inspect that portion, which I'm not qualified to do, which we do on many cases with realtors and home inspectors. Would I be able to call one of these folks that receive that direct certification as an inspector? Would they be qualified to be an inspector, or would there be another threshold that they would have to meet?
Well, they would be qualified for whatever the statutorily defined workload that particular certification allows. Again, some certifications may allow for an entry-level person to inspect other people's work, and others may not. But whatever that entry-level certification provides for under the current law, that person would be able to do that if this bill were to pass, and the Secretary of State's office, as well as the Office of Workforce Development and the 5-member board consult and determine that that's an appropriate waiver of testing in that particular field.
So, Mr. Chairman, so that I'm clear here, a person who leaves the military, and I'll tell you first of all, I support this, but a person who leaves the military and really has no civilian experience can now come out at whatever level we're talking and be an inspector under this certification process.
Well, I'm not. Again, I don't want to confuse the issue, because to be an inspector, I don't know if there is a state code that says who can inspect and who can't. I do know we have inspectors at county and state and city levels who inspect jobs for to say that, for example, for a certificate of occupancy. But if you're talking about a home inspector, I don't think there's a certification for home inspectors under current Georgia code. It usually is somebody who's an expert in the field as a contractor who also does home inspections. And in terms of who should be able to inspect an HVAC system as a sub to a home inspector, I think that's the home inspector's job, is to make sure that the person that they're hiring knows what they're doing. And you may have certified HVAC. Well, I'll tell you, I talked to 2 HVAC folks from Cartersville, Bartow County yesterday, who told me there are people who have certifications in Bartow County who don't know what they're doing. I mean, I hate to say it, but there are people who get licenses to do something that they don't really know how to do. It happens. So it's up to the individual home inspector, I think, to make sure that those folks are not the ones they're going to. And I guess when you're talking about an inspector, somebody who is experienced enough to tell the layman like me what's wrong with this house, or what's right with this house, I would think that person would have enough experience himself and probably contacts in the community of the professionals to be able to know who to use and not to use. So I'm not sure that inspectors really are licensed at all. I don't know if they are, and I don't think this bill gets into whether or not a person should be an inspector or not.
Mr. Chairman, can I do one more follow-up, please?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't know if the law has changed, but at one time, to be a home inspector, you were not required to have a license. Okay. But in order for you to be recommended, you had to have served under some home inspector for some time in order for you to get the seal of approval. Is there anywhere in this bill that will require those folks coming out that we're certifying directly to be attached to?
Nothing in this bill would do that. And to get back to your example, I think what you're referring to is probably a private industry approval, or even maybe even a private company approval, as opposed to a state approval. And so we don't get into that in this bill.
Okay.
Are you through now?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Representative Diefenbaugh.
Representative Comer, I am new at this. This is my, 15th day? Or whatever day it is. So I'm not sure of some of the procedural things here. And after thinking about some of my comments, I wanted to clarify them. One, I want to employ any veteran that has served his country to the best of their ability to get into a position that they can do and will be successful and will be accepted by the community in which they're working, and which provides safety for not only themselves but for the work that they do towards other people. I have 20 years Navy. I'm retired, so I know some of the plight of some of the military, and I just want to say that I want to encourage the successful adoption of a bill that will accomplish those things I just stated. And this bill I have some concerns about, but it's not because I'm against the military coming out and getting a certification that they deserve. And that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the questions we have at this point. I guess I don't want to make one point. It seems like through this, all these discussions that I've participated in, there's a difference of, I guess a lot of people are ready to be a craftsman when they come out, but there's a lot of questions from some of the people out there that I've talked to about starting a business of, say, air conditioning, plumbing, or whatever, and I guess we discussed about when taking this test, you can do the job, but do you know all the codes and everything? Is there distinct differences there? You think we should make a distinct difference of whether a person coming out can go to work but can't necessarily start a business?
That's probably a valid point, but I don't know that we have the tools to do that in code anywhere right now. And frankly, that may be an impermissible restriction on trade that we don't want to get into. I'll give you this example. When I graduated from the University of Georgia Law School, I went to work for another attorney, and after about 2 years of working there, I joined the Air Force. Well, the reason I joined the Air Force is because I didn't know the first thing about running a law practice. I wouldn't have been ready to do that. But when I spent 4 years on active duty and came out and knew a little bit more about, up from down and left from right legally, I was able to start my own practice. So, my example was, it was the military that prepared me for private practice. It was the military skills and disciplines that I picked up there that made me more able to go out and hang out a shingle and be successful for many years, something I could not have done without my military background. So I don't think that you can say a person is not or is less prepared because they've spent years in military service than somebody who hasn't when it comes to business acumen. I mean, you have people with MBAs who fail at business. You can't necessarily, maybe you can, I'm sure it's arguable that you can or can't train people to be good in business or have business sense, but I don't think serving in the military should count as a strike against you to say that you can't practice a private business or trade. We don't think you're qualified to be in business because you've been in the military. I mean, you're telling people don't join the military because we don't trust your business sense. I've heard that sentiment before, and I have to tell you, it's quite offensive.
I had never heard that one. You have other people that want to speak for the bill?
There are other people here to help answer questions, but I'm at your pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
Well, if they don't want to speak, just be available for questions.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
We'll hear from people who have problems with the bill. As I said before, a lot of work has gone into this, and since we have our legislative counsel here, if you can specify what part of the bill, line, number, and so forth that you have a problem with, I'd appreciate if you do that. So who wants to speak first? Bruce, you all right, sir. Okay. Morning. Give us your name again, sir.
My name is Jerry Hall. So I wrote this letter 2 days ago, before the changes were put into place, or the amendments, okay? So I'm going to stay with the letter and just let everybody take it as it is.
But that would apply to the latest version of the bill?
No, sir. This was what I wrote a couple of days ago, and so rather than, you know, I'm not a politician, I'm a contractor, so rather than talking about the latest version of the bill, the majority of what I'm going to talk about is my concerns if the bill's passed, okay? In
other words, you need to see a later version?
No, sir. I've seen it this morning,
okay,
and I really have. It's better than the first version. And I'm not a politician, so I really do not have an opinion at this point. But here's what I like to do: is I'd just like to share some of my concerns with putting someone on the street that really does not have true HVAC experience. It'll take me about a minute, maybe, well, it'll take a little bit longer than that, a couple of minutes.
Take as long as you need.
Sir?
Take as long as you need.
Okay. So I am a licensed heating and air contractor, and also a veteran, active duty 1977 to 1980, and I was in the reserves from 80 to 83. I was in 82nd Airborne Division. When I wrote this letter, I was to put my concerns out about the bill, and rest assured that my concerns are strictly related to safety and have nothing to do with the military or future competition. I would love to have competition from people that have been in the military. My company staunchly supports those who are serving and have served their country. We have partnered with Soldiers Angels since 2004 and packing over 80,000 Christmas stockings and sent to deployed troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. My company has a standing policy that if a homeowner is deployed to Afghanistan, they pay nothing for heating and air conditioning services. We have installed complete systems at no cost whatsoever to the soldier or their families. We also provide free services for those that have came back wounded, and we're known in West Georgia as the military-friendly company. Unfortunately, House Bill 188, which enables veterans to obtain a conditioned air license without taking the exam, does an injustice to our veterans and the citizens of Georgia. Obtaining a license only after passing the exam ensures that the HVAC contractor is fully qualified. There have been two horrible incidents in West Georgia in the last 5 years. In one incident, a technician was blown up underneath the house because of a propane leak. People that are coming back from Afghanistan, they don't work on propane in Afghanistan. They work on commercial equipment and air conditioning mostly. So we had a house that was completely blown up, and probably 18 months later, we had another service technician that was electrocuted. You know, there's a lot of safety, and it takes time to learn this business. So not only is the veterans could be be put in harm's way by not having to really learn the safety side of it, but the consumers at the same time could be put in harm's way. I personally think the system works pretty good if it's that we have now, if it's administered right. So I really think everybody needs to get some experience. Since a person doesn't need a contractor's license to work for an established company, veterans will still be able to find good jobs in the field. My company employs 4 veterans, and we would hire more without hesitation. It's just a matter of them applying. I would make sure that it happened. For those that want to go in business for themselves, I mean, let's just ensure that they're properly educated and trained, and let's set them up to succeed. Let's teach them some business skills, some life skills, and you know, that's basically it.
Let me ask you a question. This, the person that you said that was involved in this terrible accident, was it a veteran? What was the?
I don't know, sir.
So what do you know
It
anything?
was the owner's son of Powers Heating and Air Conditioning. Somebody may know the story better than I. He was in a crawl space. He had left to the job, and from what I have heard, maybe the homeowner was getting Alzheimer's and maybe turned the gas on, and when he crawled back underneath the house, he either lit a cigarette or clicked a Nextel, and everything just blew up.
So it could happen to anybody, I guess. It could happen to any.
It could happen to anybody, but my point, sir, is that unless you've been doing it for 3 or 4 years, there's just certain things that, you know, I mean, you need to learn this. You need to learn what you're doing.
All right. I have a question. Representative Glanton.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you for your service. And HUA on the 82nd, I was with the 18th Airborne Corps, so great there. And also thank you for sharing your concerns with us this morning. My question is, as this bill was being vetted, all participants, including HVACs, were asked to come to the table and to participate in that vetting process. My understanding is that they did come, but offered no input, offered no suggestions, and offered no reasonable amendments that would make this bill satisfy their desires. Can you speak to that?
No, sir, I can't. I was not there.
Okay. But all the other organizations that this impacts came to the table, including HVAC, and their desire was not to participate or to vet the process. So I just want to say that to you. They had an opportunity, according to the information that I researched, they had an opportunity to participate in this prior to coming here, and they chose not to.
Right, and I think the last amendment with the 5-member board, if they're experienced contractors, I think that will have an impact. At the same time, are they going to be able to look at these individuals over an hour and you know, just have it in their mind if they're qualified to go out and, I mean, there's a business side to this as well. I mean, you know, the veterans need to understand that, you know, they have to make money. I mean, they have to make profits. And so they really need someone that can teach them how to run a business and to be successful at it as much as anything. So there's really 2 sides to it. And
well, I certainly thank you for your input, but I would suggest that, or submit, that veterans from the time they become squad leaders all the way up the chain of command are doing nothing but learning how to run businesses. Thank you.
well, I agree with that.
Representative Perzo.
Mr. Chairman. The young man who was killed in the explosion, was he licensed?
I'm not sure his father was licensed. I mean, the father lost his son that day. So I'm not sure.
Okay. Do you believe it's the proper role of the state government to decide who is fit to start a business or not fit to start a business?
Certain businesses, for sure.
So you think the government should have a say in
certain businesses.
Thank you very much.
Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I guess to some extent, to my colleague, the state does define that because we do put some requirements on licensing to allow people to start businesses, just as a general rule of thumb. I'm going back to the questions I'd asked before. You own a business, is that
Yes,
correct?
I
And
do.
you have people working
I have,
for you?
22 people?
And are all of them licensed?
No.
Do they need to be?
They're licensed to handle refrigerant, which is a different license that's a federal mandate.
Okay.
Some of them are, and I have a guy, if I may, I have a guy that works for me that's an E7, that's in special ops, that's been with me now for about a year, and he is getting ready to be deployed. And I take care of my veterans. My best friend in the world was wounded in Iraq, and he is my little brother now. He calls me his big brother. It's a long story, but there's a lot to this, and the veterans need more than just a hall pass to go into business. They need a lot more. But
Well, I don't think anybody's questioning anybody's, support of veterans.
Right.
Most of us here have been in the service on this committee as well. I'm just trying to understand what it means to get a license. That's really what I'm trying to get at. So you have a license.
right.
Other than a refrigeration license, do any of your employees, who I presume are the ones who are going out and installing HVAC systems and repairing them, are they licensed under what we're referring to in this bill? Do they have I'm not sure we've even identified the specific license, but a professional or contractor's license?
No.
Okay, so you don't need a license in order to work in this industry, but you do need one to have your own company. Would that be an accurate statement?
Correct.
Okay.
That's very, very, very accurate. And I went to technical school for 2 years to learn this business before I got into it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Somebody else wants to come up and speak? Give it that again. Well, he'll say. You give you the name and
Yes, sir.
what business you in and so forth.
My name's Dennis McKeon. I have a company in heating and air, D. McKeon Heating and Air in Kennesaw, Georgia. It's great that we have this group together today to get the facts correct, and some facts today were not correct as been presented.
We appreciate you coming.
Thank you. One of the facts that we're talking about here, which Representative Thomas just talked about, was you do not need a Class 1 HVAC license to work in the heating and air industry. You can come out and use the skills and the benefits that the veterans have, which we appreciate having, and they can come work for any company in the heating and air industry. So they do not need to have a Class 1 license from the heating and air department or from the state. If you want to have your own business and work for yourself, then you must get a Class 1 HVAC license and maintain it. And so is this bill to get veterans jobs, or is this bill to put veterans in their own business? That's a question that I have to the governor and this board.
In my opinion, it's sort of to get them jobs, and if they have the skills to go further than start a business. Most of my experience in life has been that people work in the business a while before they ever start a new business. You got to learn the ropes first. That's my opinion.
Well, as Jerry that was just up here speaking, the safety is a huge issue when you come and work in this field, because you're working with electricity, natural gas, fuel oil, all different voltages of electricity, and I employ veterans also. I've been in business 26 years. I've had 2 veterans actually get their Class 1 license, and I helped them get it, and I'm proud to say that. And I have one employee right now that's been out 8 years, and he came into employment and applied for the job, and he said he had heat and air experience. I went back and talked to him yesterday to make sure I had all my facts straight before I came and talked to this board. And I asked him straight out, I said, when you came into employment here, do you think you would have been qualified to pass or to be a Class 1 heating and air contractor? And he told me, no, I would not be. And he said, I had never even worked on a residential split air conditioning system until I came to this company. So that's 8 years ago that he was in the service. I don't know what's currently being taught, but when he went to into his school, they taught for 9 weeks, and they taught him only on package types of units, which were commercial style package units or even window units. And he told me that if he needed extra help, they had civilian contractors there to bring him in to help do the diagnosis and fix. And he had his own shop set up in Iraq where the units were being brought into his shop, and they would actually repair them. Every once in a while, he'd have to go out into the field. But when he was in active duty, he didn't work on anything that we work on here in Georgia in that regard, in a split air conditioning heat pump. Or that he didn't work with any natural gas, propane gas, which is extremely a safety issue you got to know about.
Have you seen the latest version of this bill?
No, I have version. The one this morning I didn't get, but I have version LC 212071 is what I have.
That's the latest.
I have got one update that said the military calls it, let's see, no, that's not it. Let's see.
That's the latest version right here.
Let me get my glasses
Let's
on.
see,
here.
LC 212126S is the latest? Okay.
Yeah, I don't have that current one, but
Could
it still comes back to the issue
Well,
of
what I wanted to do is what we after today. I mean, we appreciate all the testimony, but what we want to do is today, if we can get toward passing the bill, is for you to specify to our legislative council here exactly what part of this bill you don't agree with.
Well, specifically,
you want to? Can we give you a copy of the bill?
Specifically on mine, line 28, where it says number 3, conditioned air contractors class 1.
Take a look at this latest version.
Okay, I would say delete that particular one because a veteran does not need to be a class 1 contractor to be employed in the heating and air industry here in Georgia. Now, let me look at this and see if it's the same line, 28. It's line 29 on this new bill. I would ask the board to delete line 29, which is the class 1 licensing for conditioned air contractor, due to the fact that you do not need a class 1 license to work in the industry in Georgia. However, I do support, and I don't know where the line is on this one, but when you bring a spouse in that has a license in another state, as long as we have reciprocating agreements with that state, that spouse be allowed to have their license in the state of Georgia. And we do have reciprocating agreements.
So don't we see that in this bill?
It's in the bill with, it doesn't say that reciprocating agreements, but it just says if they come into the state as a spouse and they have a business in that state with a license, then they can have the license in this state. So if they're qualified in the state that we respect with reciprocating agreements, then they should be able to have a license in this state. I don't know what line it says it on there.
David, do you know where that fit in?
Okay.
That whole section starts at line 49.
I would agree with line 49 as long as reciprocating agreements with other state would be.
So which line would you change then?
Let's see.
I would suggest line 51 after the word state, with which Georgia has a reciprocating agreement.
Okay.
So you got the language on that then, David? Yes. Thank you. Oh, anything else?
That's basically what I would have to say, and I appreciate the time today to be able to hear my opinion on that.
We appreciate you coming.
And
Yeah, we have a question.
yes, sir.
Just out of general curiosity, if a person comes into your organization with some experience in the field, what would the difference in pay be between one that applied with military background sufficient and also one that came in as a contract employee, a contract rated employee?
Well, I'm active in the Chattahoochee Technical College on a board over there for the Heating and Air Department over there, and we try to employ those guys when they come out, and we start them at $12 an hour after they've gone through a 2-year school over there, and depending on what their skill level is and how they prove themselves, at that point they will jump up at that time. If they basically are staying at the same level, they'll stay at that level for a period of time. However, if a veteran comes in, we'll probably hire them in at about $15 an hour and see what their skill level is at that point too.
And what would be if a person applied vet or not that had a contract license, Class 1?
It's very rare that a contractor, a licensed contractor, or a heating and air Class 1 holder would work in the industry for another contractor. It has happened, and I've had 2 of them that have over the 26 years that have come, but it's not.
What would be a typical range? What would you hire?
Probably about 22 an hour is probably where we would bring them in that range right there. But it depends, their experience and what they've done. If they had, if they had been in business for 15 years and they had their own business and they had great experience, they'd come in, somewhere in that range. I think if a vet came in and had the license that we're talking about, giving them right now because he comes out of the service with experience and he goes through without taking an exam, I would say he would probably come in around a $14 an hour range and see what his value is at that point. The technician I was talking about earlier that I had that employed has been with me now 6 years and almost 7. When he came in, he couldn't get in the truck and go do service calls. If he was not a veteran, I wouldn't have kept him because he was not qualified. However, now I've trained him, I've educated him, he's got the experience, and he's a top-notch technician. He would be qualified now to go take the Class 1 test at this point, and I would sign off for him to go do that. But when he came in, there's no way I would sign off for him to go do that. And to get a license here in Georgia, you have to have 3 contractors, existing holding contractor, card holding contractors, to sign off on you to say you would be qualified to be a contractor. And I would not at the time he came to my employment, but I would now.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions?
Representative, yes, Representative Black.
As to your question about the line 29, this bill is basically empowering the director, the governor's office of workforce development, and 5 members of your license board to determine whether or not any military classification is equal to or exceeds the standards that we have in now. So it's not this committee charge here to determine whether that these classifications should be included in there, and we're certainly not skilled in making that judgment. So I think your safety is in the provisions of this bill that puts this decision as to whether or not these different military certifications meet the standards, and so that.
From my personal experience with hiring veterans, and I've employed quite a few, not one has been qualified to come in and be a Class 1 heating and air contractor or hold the Class 1 license yet. I'm sure there are, but I have not personally in the 26 years that I've been in business. So from my experience, it does not have that. But I'm not saying, there probably are veterans that would be qualified. All we ask is that they take a simple 6-hour test to prove that they are. If we go to another state, we have to take the test. As an existing heating and air contractor that's been in business 26 years, if I go to the state of Alabama, they require me to take an exam. So I would go in and take their 6-hour test and get a state card from them saying I'm qualified. It's only 1 day of their time. If they're qualified, they should be able to prove it that, that they're qualified. And we do respect the veterans because we already give them 5 to 10 points on the test before they even take the test, depending on their ability, depending on their time of duty and disabilities. So we already have that. If one other thing on this bill, if one thing would be is to put a fast track to the veteran to take the exam. And I'm sure the Secretary of State's office could provide some kind of fast track test for them to take it, an exam. So, we're behind the veterans. We would love to have their abilities and quality, in our field, but the basic for the safety for the citizens of Georgia and the safety of the vets, they really need to take the exam. It's only a 6-hour test, so let's, put the Secretary of State's office in position to let's get this exam where they can take it quick. It's just a 6-hour test, very simple. It's not that difficult to take, and it's 1 day of their time when they come in out of the 180 days.
Let me ask a question.
Yes, sir.
That has come up quite a bit, and we were talking to Secretary of State in Macon, and we talked about can we give it at will? Can I hear from the lady on that, maybe?
I can't speak to all the tests with these specific licensing boards. Some tests that the boards give are CBT tests that people can go at pretty regular intervals and take. Some tests are only given at certain times of the year. I think some of the construction industry tests are only given 3 times a year. The tests are outsourced or either given through association connections, and that's based on the demand for the exams. I'll give you an example, and this is not one of the exams that we're talking about here, but with geologists, they only test like 40 people a year, and so it's just not.
How about air conditioning?
It's offered 3 times a year.
Can't do it anymore.
That's something that we'd have to look at based on the demand.
That seemed to be a hang-up is why wait a while, because, he's out of the service, don't have a job, and so anyway.
I would suggest that we put a fast track on that if that's what we need to do, is to put a fast track on them, the veterans having an exemption from the 3 times a year and having them take the exam, within 30 days of their application acceptance.
You realize you're asking for a tax increase? Because the Secretary of State's office is going to want more money if we try to put something like that on him, and justly so.
If we have to do that, take care of our veterans, let's do it.
I must, Representative Pizarro.
From the other testimony, it seems to me that you're eager to hire veterans.
Yes, sir.
It seems like there's much less eagerness to get into free market competition with veterans owning their HVAC companies.
It's mostly about the safety to the public, and in accordance to, let me get this right here, Georgia Code OCGA 43-14-1, Declaration of Purpose. It states that this chapter is enacted for the purpose of safeguarding homeowners, other property owners, tenant, the general public against faulty, inadequate, inefficient, and unsafe electrical, plumbing, low voltage wiring, utility contracting, or conditioner installation. The practice of electrical contracted plumbing contracting, installation, or repairing low voltage contracting, utility contracting, and conditioner contracting are declared to be business of profession affecting the public's interest, and this chapter shall be liberally construed so as to accomplish the purpose stated in this code section. And I've got 10 copies here if you would like them.
So if I'm an HVAC small business owner and I'm licensed, how many unlicensed employees am I allowed to have before I have to have a second license?
You can have as many as you want. I can hire 100 veterans if I want under my license and work all 100 of them.
But would you need to go out and personally inspect every square inch of every job?
I don't have to inspect every square inch because they work under our license, and we have to qualify them because we're liable for them. So we're not going to put somebody out on a job that would accidentally electrocute themselves or blow up a house because they don't know how to, run a gas pipe or something to that effect.
But someone licensed is not necessarily inspecting everything, correct?
Well, you pull permits to do it, and then the state or the city that you're in would send an inspector out to do that. But we do inspect our work. It's not required that everybody inspect their work, but we do that.
But somebody licensed inspects everything?
No. I have supervisors in my company that could be qualified to take, or that are qualified to take the test and could pass, but they have not done it, and they are not licensed. However, they're qualified, and I qualify them personally to make sure that they know what's going on. But they're doing work under my license,
right,
and they do not need a license to do the work in heating and air.
Okay, but you wouldn't say that someone necessarily who is unlicensed is necessarily unsafe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Representative Glanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also thank you for hiring veterans. It's unfortunate that you got one that didn't have quite the experience. But in regards to safety, I would say I can't think of an organization that is a stickler for regulations regarding safety than the military. I will tell you that. But one of the things I want to make folks aware of, there are different levels of experience in the military. And from the time and I'm speaking primarily from the Army because that's what I know, but it's probably relevant to all the military forces. From the time we enter MOS training or occupational training, then we go to BNOC and ANOC and additional classifications through identifiers. So you could potentially have a person coming out, and maybe your guy was maybe a E4, E5 and just didn't get to those levels. But you have guys coming out of the military with more years experience than you and with more training in their particular field than you. So we have to just notice that the military has steps of expertise as they move along in the forces as well. So I just want to kind of bring that to your attention.
I respect that, and I understand what you're saying, but all we're saying is to prove that they do have that experience is that they take a simple 6-hour test, and let's do a fast track to get them that exam. Get it within the 30 days, and so they're not sitting there unemployed and on whatever unemployment or anything else, because we definitely don't want veterans unemployed. Let's work on getting a fast track to the exam and improve it, because if they've got the 20 or 30 years experience, more than what I have, great, let's bring them in.
And thank you for that comment, but at each of those levels, there is training. When I finished ANOC, there was training. When I finished BNOC, there's testing. There's testing, and so at every level of that MOS, as you elevate, you're always being constantly tested throughout the military, and you're trained semi-annually in most cases to show your proficiency in that particular occupational skill. So they are trained.
Thank you, sir. In all due respect, though, if they're trained and they know what they're doing, they ought to be able to take one day and take a 6-hour test to prove to the state that our citizens will be safe, that there's not problems with it.
I think they proved that throughout their military career, sir. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Counsel, could you get words between you there to exactly what he proposes to change there?
I have those two changes.
Okay, could you tell us again what they?
Well, on the version that you're looking at,
Where is he?
The 2126S, it will be striking line 29, which would take conditioned air contractor class 1 out of the bill, and on line 51, on the spouses licensing, it would add the words on line 51 after state, with which Georgia has a reciprocal agreement, which might be the case now. I don't have that book.
Yeah, okay.
If we have a reciprocal agreement, it seems like this.
I just want to bring that up as that's the first one, I guess, that we've got the details on. We'll vote on it later.
And also somewhere in there about fast-tracking the test for veterans within 30 days. Somewhere, I don't know where you would put that because there's nothing referenced in there on a line to that.
Well, that would change the whole bill. I mean, that would be a whole bill, changing the bill.
Well, give it that way again.
If in the bill somewhere it would state that for the Class 1 HVAC license, that the test would be done within 30 days of receipt of the application. So if I was a veteran and I came in and applied, within 30 days I would be able to take the test, so I would not have to wait for that license.
Yeah, that's the part we haven't figured out.
Right. I don't know how you do it. That's y'all's job. I don't understand that part of it.
Pardon? Yeah, okay. Who's that? Oh, okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Could have anybody else want to speak? All right, go ahead. Come up here. There you go. There you go.
My name is Ellen Whitaker, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the Plumbing and Mechanical Association of Georgia. We currently have 137 company owners, that would be master plumbers, who employ over 2,000 licensed technicians. We support the bill in the effort to fast-track getting the veterans jobs, and I'm pleased to say that right now any veteran with any experience can immediately get a job within the state of Georgia. They do not need the journeyman plumbing license in order to do that. They would be working under a master plumber license. The lines of the bill that I'd like to address, in the discussions that we had, it was my understanding that the division
What's the
director...
line number? Line number?
Oh, 22. Line number 22. Representative Coomer said that the division director must consult with the governor's office and the members of the relevant boards, and I don't see the word must in there, and we think that it's important that there be working between the applicant looking at the MOS and this board. So I believe we need to add that in there.
Can you give council the words that you want to change?
The division director must consult with the governor's office of workforce development and the 5 members. I don't have 26, so I made notes, so if that.
What's that?
I can draft the language.
Okay.
I would say on line 22, the division director shall consult with governors, office of workforce development, and 5 members of the relevant divisions of the licensing board, which be designated by the governor, and shall determine the military specialties.
Okay.
And determine.
It would be my understanding then that this group of people would look at the military specification to say where it falls for these particular classifications. The next area would be on line 30, where it states that the former member of the military would apply to the division director for immediate issue. I would like to see that go to the specific licensing board. It was my understanding in conversations that the intent of this bill would replicate what the current procedure is. And the current procedure would be that an applicant who right now would have military experience, their application would go before the licensing board, and then the licensing board would determine whether or not the qualifications where they fit. So I would like to see that go back to the licensing board and not be under the purview of the division director to immediately issue that.
Okay. Anything else?
The
And how many, you say you're plumbers?
Pardon?
Plumbing industry?
The plumbing industry.
And
I'm their executive
how many
director.
members do you represent?
Well, we have companies. We're a company-based organization, so we have 137 companies that belong.
Thank you.
But we employ
Thank you.
up to that. The other comment that was brought up is how you obtain the journeyman license. You're basically working underneath a licensed plumber for 3 years. So the military experience that they have, the mechanics of it, could be very well applicable to matching up to this license. And a journeyman is not allowed to contract to conduct a business. So part of this was, are we giving them jobs or are we giving them ability to open a company? Someone who would be issued a journeyman plumbing license would not be allowed to open their own company. A master plumber, that classification allows you.
Is there a point, a line number or whatever, where?
No, I was just saying
okay.
when there were comments before, I was just addressing that.
All right.
So the individuals are could be immediately employed with their military experience. And we feel it real important that that the licensing board. I'm sorry?
You have a question? What's that? He's, what line you're referring to?
On line 28 of this chart, it only provides for a German plumber's license, not a master plumber's license.
That's correct. But earlier there was conversation saying whether or not individuals could start a business, and I think it was discussed whether a person could go out and contract for business as a journeyman plumber, which they would not be entitled to do.
Are you saying a change is necessary?
No.
No? Okay. Thank you.
I was answering a question that you did not ask.
All right.
How about that?
All right. Anything else?
Mm-mm.
Thank you very much for your input.
Okay.
Sir? Ask what?
I'd like the opportunity to respond to comments that we took at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to let you do that. Is anybody else that wants to speak on the bill? Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. I sincerely appreciate the amount of work and insight that has went into this bill by the committee members.
Give them your name.
My name is Tricia Pridemore, and I'm the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Workforce Development. We've been working on this particular issue now for the last 8 months because we have, between now and the end of 2016, between 60 and 80,000 returning veterans coming back to the state of Georgia. I know that it is every Georgian's best interest to try to see these men and women who have so dutifully served our country, to try to get them back to work and do everything that we possibly can to cut red tape and help them be an active part of Georgia's workforce. The other side of this, besides just helping them go back to work, that really does help the state, is it could keep them off the unemployment insurance rolls so that they are able to go back to work faster, even if they're just receiving temporary UI. So I did want to address a couple of the questions that have been posed today. In particular, what the bill does is it allows for the work that we've been doing in our office over the last several months to be done in collaboration with the Division Director of the Secretary of State's office, as well as with 5 members of each of the requisite division licensing boards, so that we can go through and do some of the hard research that's been done on this particular bill, so that we can get more of them back into the workforce faster. Let me give you all some examples. A level 5 electrician comes out with section 6.4.4, which I could submit copies of this. They should pursue increased knowledge of budget, manpower, resources, and personnel management. So when we're talking about HVAC contractors and electrical contractors, they're getting business acumen skills. They're getting that knowledge while they're in the military. A level 7, for example, 6.3.4, 7 levels should be continuation training courses or obtain additional knowledge on management of resources and personnel. And I think that all of us would agree that those are fundamental work ethic and business acumen skills that they're learning. So with that, I would be available for questions, but would like to encourage the committee members to pass the bill.
Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I believe the air conditioning representative was wanting to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Bruce Widener. I represent the Conditioned Air Association of Georgia. And let me set the record straight. We were invited to attend the meeting with the Governor's Workforce Development Office, and we attended that and tried to make comments. Some of our comments were that our members were vehemently opposed to any way that you would give a license to a vet. As much as we support the vets, give a license to somebody to start a business when they can't take their test and prove their qualifications. We are all for the vets. The bottom line in this is what this bill does is give somebody that we're unsure of their qualifications, give them a license to go into the business. They can go into business today for any heat and air conditioning contractor or plumber or electrician. Go to work for them and prove their qualifications and later take the exam and become licensed and go into business. As for specifics, the chairman is wanting specifics, and if the bill is going to pass, I do have some suggested changes for Mr. Bundrick. On line 22, we've talked about this earlier with Ellen. I would like to, at the beginning of B, say a committee composed of the division director, strike in consultation with.
Now, is that tied in with somebody who's already made a suggestion?
No, so this is completely different.
Different from what was given?
What was already said, yep.
Go ahead.
Let me just read what it says and maybe see what you think. A committee composed of the division director, 1 representative of the Governor's Office of Workplace Development, and 5 members of the relevant divisions of the licensing boards who shall be designated by the Governor, shall consider an applicant's qualifications. Then say a majority vote of this committee shall determine the military specialties or certifications or the training or experience for which substantially meet or exceed the requirements to obtain a license. Such as we've became familiar with the superintendent level 9, which is a designation in the Air Force, I believe. But we don't believe that there would be any problem with somebody with that qualification or level of experience becoming licensed. But let a majority of this committee determine their qualifications. It was also said that perhaps an E4. I was in the service, I was an E4, and my MOS was finance. I did the payroll in the Army, but I'm certainly not qualified to be a CPA today because I was an E5. But an E4 would probably not meet the qualifications to be a licensed contractor, whereas again the superintendent level 9 would be because he'd be a level 9. So those are my comments about that. And one other constructive criticism or constructive situation on this would be on page 3, let's see, on line 75 of the other substitute, David, where it talks about a residential light commercial, it's B under 431418B, talks about a residential light commercial. There's no such thing in the code, so you need to put in there again the class 1. restricted, electrical contractor class 1, the journeyman plumber, or the conditioned air class 1. But again, I think the main thing that we need to think about is whether or not we want to put these guys into business as a conditioned air contractor or electrical contractor, or do we want them to get a job, and all of our guys a lot of them are veterans. A lot of them hire every veteran they can possibly get. We want to put them to work and to get them a license, but a lot of times, as we know in military too, you might do one thing a million times, but you may not be qualified to start a business.
So you got into change that you proposed then?
Yes, sir. I just gave them to Mr. Bundrick.
Would you vote for the bill after that changes?
I have a feeling the bill's going to pass. This is just perfect the bill. Hope perfect.
The bill's not going to pass unless we get it right. But
well, again, my members are vehemently opposed to giving a license to go into business to somebody who hasn't proven qualifications where they can.
Did you put that in there?
Yes, sir, I think we did.
All right, we got a problem again with time, and thank you. So,
yes, sir.
And we can't pass it today because we haven't had time because we got to go into session at 15 minutes, and that's you got a quick question.
Just a brief statement, very brief. May I?
Yes, sir.
My name's Shane Strickland, and I'm on the state, the licensing board for plumbing. And a lot of references are made to fast track. The line item on there that says you have to be signed up within 180 days. You could actually do away with that somewhat because theoretically the test is given about every 120 days. So I mean the remedies there.
Test for what?
For the plumbing,
okay.
For instance. It's given in this year, for instance, April, August, and December. And it's really about every 120 days, give or take. So, I mean, it's there.
Okay. All right. You made note of that, David. Mark, did you have a comment?
Just real briefly, talk a little bit. I'm Mark Woodall.
Go ahead and get to that.
Mark Woodall. I represent Associated General Contractors. We're the trade association for commercial general contractors and construction-related firms, such as the specialty contractors that have spoken today. We're here to tell you we're with our friends. Here for the veterans and we're for our friends in the audience who've spoke about concerns in the bill. But what I wanted to relate to the committee, number one, I wanted to thank the chairman for his leadership in asking for the impacted parties about getting together and working out some of the differences. But I did want to recognize also Ms. Pridemore and the Governor's Office of Workforce Development. They invited all of the related parties to a meeting to provide input. And one of the things that came out of that meeting, we had a Colonel London from the National Guard, who was very articulate in explaining what his folks do with regard to both the training and the certifications on the testing. And what my impression was of the agreement and what's currently in the latest version of the bill is not only do we have the workforce development folks and a director from the Secretary of State, we have representatives of each of the respective licensing boards not only looking at the experience that they have in the military training, but also looking at the certifications, the testing that they take to see if it is comparable to the requirements for experience in testing in the state of Georgia. And if it's not, then they don't have to approve it. And you potentially could have somebody that meets the experience requirements, but the testing does not line up. So they'd waive the experience that's currently in the law, which requires you to work for one of these folks for 4 years before you can sit for the exam, but still require the exam because the test that was done is not comparable to the state level. All the speakers that have brought up, that have come here on behalf of the mechanical contractors and the plumbers and electricians have made great points and addressing some things. I just wanted to go on record, Mr. Chairman, thanking you and for all the interested parties trying to come together to get a compromise on what is a good public policy idea, and we appreciate the opportunity to keep perfecting it. Thank you.
Thank you. I regret that once again we run out of time, and at this time I let the members go to the House and do the job over there, and we just we got a number of things. It won't take a lot of time, I don't think, to iron out the difference. Do you agree? You heard everything that was proposed there. Is to come back and finish this thing up and get a bill?
We may need another meeting, but again, I just wanted to recognize the workforce development folks and the sponsor, Coomer, for all of the ideas we've brought and the changes that have been made from the original bill.
Representative Coomer, could we get together and iron out these things that have been mentioned and things? Yes, sir. All right.
Thank you.
With that, then we'll appreciate everybody's comment and input, and I think it's worthwhile to get it right, because I've been up here too long to see things done one time and come back and fix it. Thank you.